Ambassador Tzipi Hotovely, welcome to Hard Talk.
Hi, it's great to be here.
What is Israel's strategic objective right now? Is it to restore quiet on that southern front with the Gaza Strip, or does it go much deeper? Is it to destroy the military capability of the Islamic militant groups?
Well, the first thing is definitely true. We want to restore quiet. Just yesterday, we had another night that most Israelis spend in shelters. From my personal experience, my family, they all live in the center of Israel, and they all spend in shelters. My mother is over 60. She had to go to the shelter for the first time, for many years that she had to go through this experience. And my eldest daughter, Mayan, she's 7, and she's Zooming with her friends in Israel. All her class was in shelters because children are, Hamas is targeting our children. And we need to protect ourselves. And I have a sense that every government that would have been in the same position, parliament being fired with rockets, the Israeli parliament was evacuated just 2 days ago, would have done the same.
If you want the rush to the shelters to stop, you want safety for the Israeli population, surely then you should want an urgent ceasefire. But all the signs are, from your own government in Israel, there is absolutely no interest in getting to a ceasefire. Benny Gantz, the defense minister, says the army will continue to attack. Buildings will continue to crumble. Your prime minister says this is just the beginning. We're going to hit them with strikes they have never dreamed of. Where's the intent for a ceasefire there?
I didn't say anything about ceasefire. I was speaking about a sustainable solution for our population, for the people of Israel. The people of Israel deserve to live in peace, to go to work, to go to school, without having this fearing of the fact that rockets will be in the streets again. So I think what the government wants is to make sure that the capabilities of Hamas will be harmed, and we're doing everything in our power to minimize casualties, but we are doing everything in our power also to hurt the leadership, the military leadership of Hamas, this jihadi terror organization.
As we speak, more than 80 Palestinians have been killed, including 17 under 18, 17 children. You tell me that we're doing everything in our power to avoid civilian casualties. Patently, that is not working. So you need to change, don't you? You need to avoid this terrible level of collateral damage. How are you going to do that?
Well, Stephen, you know, because you served in Israel, so you know how those terror organizations are behaving. They're using women and children as human shields. They're building their, all their headquarters inside of regular buildings. So what Israel is doing, as you know, before we go on attack, we actually deliver a message to all civilians and to tell to the Palestinians in Gaza, Israel is going to attack in a certain point. So everyone knows, everyone can, get free. People are not in our fire, and we want to hurt those terrorists. And this is our duty as a democratic country defending its people.
I'm going to quote to you, not an outside organization, but an internal Israeli organization, B'Tselem, a leading human rights group inside your country, who have said bombing apartment towers, which we have seen it for ourselves in the last 48 hours, bombing apartment towers which are not a military target, leaving dozens of families homeless, that, they say, is a war crime.
Who's committing a war crime at the moment is Hamas, and it's actually committing double war crime. Once, it's using civilian facilities in order to shoot and launch rockets on population in Israel. And the second civil crime and a war crime is the fact they're shooting and targeting children. Israel is targeting only military targets, and I can stand behind that.
Just established you are targeting civilian buildings, apartment towers.
We are targeting civilian buildings after we announce that we're going to target them. That means that all civilians can go, and we are targeting places where Hamas is locating their headquarters. So we can say very clearly, Israel is working according to international law, and Israel is doing everything in its power to minimize casualties.
You used to be a politician in Netanyahu's government. You're now
Yes.
a diplomat. As a diplomat, I guess you have to listen very carefully to the messages being delivered from right around the world. It is interesting what is being said, not least in Washington, D.C. While President Biden has announced his unwavering support for Israel's right of self-defense, and that came as no surprise, it was interesting that his Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, added this. He says Israel has, quote, an extra burden, a particular obligation to avoid civilian casualties. You're failing to meet that measure right now.
I think every democratic country, including Britain when we were fighting in Afghanistan, including the Americans when they were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, every country, democratic country that is dealing with terror organizations, you know how they're dealing with their population. They are building their military infrastructure internal the population. And you know that part of the fact that we are fighting them is to make sure that the world will realize that the Middle East at the moment is in the middle of a huge political debate between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And this is my question. Is the international community is going to support the radicals, Hamas, recognized terror organization by the UK and by the United States and more countries, or it's going to support people that actually want to think about coexistence? I'm here to say Israel is for coexistence, not for having a war. And we're fighting only because one reason.
Let me ask you a question.
Because rockets are being fired on our cities.
Yes, and you very powerfully evoked the feeling of Israelis living with rocket fire coming down, going to the shelters. You talked about your own family. Just as an individual, as a human being, not as a diplomat, just imagine for a moment that you live in Gaza. Imagine you are the parent of one of those 17 children killed in the last 72 hours by the Israeli bombardment. What do you think that's going to do to your attitude toward Israel? Do you think that's going to make you more amenable to this peaceful coexistence you talk about, or do you think it's going to fuel your anger, your determination to do whatever you can to change the dynamic in the Middle East?
Let me answer for you as a mother. I'm a mother of young children. So every loss of a child is a tragedy. But you need to understand that Hamas stands behind the loss of those children in Gaza. First of all, from a technical reason. Some of those rockets are being misfired, and the kids being killed in Gaza are as a result of those rockets being fired on Israel. The second reason is the fact they're using those kids as human shields. So I can tell you, we feel very bad about every loss of human life. But it's important to understand. But wait a second, but it's important to understand the only reason we don't have hundreds of kids being killed in Israel is the fact that Israel invested major amount of money in Iron Dome. And Iron Dome keeps on working every single day and night in order to prevent our kids to be killed. So Hamas didn't do the same.
What's an acceptable
Hamas
level
in a
of
cynical way is actually using his kids and putting them in the front.
What's an acceptable level of collateral damage going forward from here? We understand the Israeli army is gathering on the Gaza border. There is real discussion in Israel about if and when a ground offensive will come. We know what happened in 2014.
Yes.
More than 2,000 Palestinians were ultimately killed in that summer war. 550 of them were children. Are we looking at that level of bloodshed, that higher price you are prepared to inflict on the Palestinians,
Stephen,
to do what you want to do
Stephen, I'm
to
so
Hamas?
sad. I'm so sad that you're even mentioning the fact that this bloodshed is a result of a radical ideology in the Middle East. It's not the result of our values. Our values is democracy, human rights. We want our people to live in peace.
I'm talking about your strategy, your intent, and what you are prepared to do.
So I would like to answer. Look, I asked just very few days ago. I was sitting 5 minutes away from Westminster, and I asked what would have happened in Britain if rockets would have been fired on the British Parliament. And I didn't hear even one British person that said Britain should have just, sitting in peace and quiet, doing nothing. So everyone can understand that Israel at the moment is a country under attack, is a country under fire, and we're fighting a terror organization. We're not fighting, a peaceful country. We're fighting cruel terror organization.
Leave aside,
so we need to fight.
Understood. Leave aside the legality of how Israel conducts its operations. The International Criminal Court has said it will investigate what is happening right now, just as they have investigated war crime allegations going back to the 2014 war, and the UN has indeed also talked about war crimes committed by Israel and Hamas going back to 2014. So there is that legal aspect to it.
I don't accept that. I don't accept that.
Well, you may not accept it, but everything I've just said is the truth.
The only organizations that are committing war crimes are the terror organizations.
Well,
Israel is a democratic country that is fighting according to international law.
Let me give you this quote from Benjamin Netanyahu after the 2014 massive offensive. He proclaimed, "We've destroyed their network of attack tunnels built over many years. We've destroyed approximately 1,000 terrorists, including the top command."